This is a Geek Leader podcast, and I'm your host, John Rauda. This show is all about helping us grow as leaders, become better technologists, and improve our lives both at work and at home. I hope you enjoy the show and learn a lot. Hello, world, and welcome to episode 229 of the Geek Leader podcast. I'm your host, John Rauda. And today's sponsor is A2 Hosting. I've been using A2 Hosting solid state hosting solutions for our website at geekleader.com for many, many years now, and absolutely love their support, their service, and all the features that you get. You get access to cPanel. You get all of the things that you can imagine for a great WordPress experience, including their A2 optimized WordPress, which does extra security checks, extra lockdown. You can lock down your editor file so you can't edit anything inside there. You get alerts whenever there are file changes that are done. You can also do automatic updates, backups, and more with A2 Hosting. So highly recommend it. Go to geekleader.com/A2 to get more information and to sign up for their solid state turbocharged speed hosting today. Again, that's at geekleader.com/A2. All right, Geek Leaders. Today on the show, I have Jeremie Kubicek. He is a communicator, entrepreneur. He's the author of a book called 100X Leaders, 5 Voices, 5 Gears. He is a national bestseller and a great speaker and an excellent storyteller. He started over 20 companies while living in Oklahoma City, Moscow, Atlanta, and London. And now he is here on a Geek Leader podcast. Jeremie, welcome to the show.
Hey, good to be with you. So grateful, John, for all you're doing, man.
Hey, if you don't mind, just tell the audience a little bit about kind of how you got to where you are today and what you're doing, just lay some context for our conversation.
Yeah, so I started off as a young whippersnapper with a vision of using business as a platform for impact. And like, how do you do that? And so I moved to Russia, as you do right after college, and I got to experience 1993, 95 is like Chicago in the 30s in Moscow. It was like Mafia, car bombings, had a client assassinated. I got stuck in a coup attempt. We started an economic school, a marketing consulting business, an accounting training company. And all of that was just hard, but so good. It's those hard times that really make you. And so that's how I started my career. And I watched 70 years of communism and what it did to people and how it grayed them out and it made them apathetic and really just abdicate more than empower them. And it just really, really stuck with me. And so then I got into private equity and started getting into corporations and then started my own businesses. But it all stemmed from this idea of like, how do you get people to engage, not comply? And I kind of just used my early experience in Russia to help get me started.
So one of the stories that I heard you tell before was about an attempt on where like you were in Moscow and then all these like guards came up with guns or something like that, and one guy kind of snuck in or came to your room and was trying to hide out there or something like that. Can you elaborate on that? I'm sure I'm butchering it right now.
Yeah, no, you want a Mafia story? That's good. I'll give you a Mafia story.
Yeah, I think that'll get us started.
Yeah, that'd be great. Because a lot of people are like, all right, Mafia stories. Well, I lived above a Mafia group, and the guy was from his name was Andik. And he was from Armenia. And so, I grew up an only child. And so you learn how to make friends with bullies. You make friends with, people of all shapes and sizes. And he had 3 fingers cut off as warnings. That was a warning, don't get into someone else's territory. So he kind of had this hang loose hand. And
so he didn't learn his lesson the first 2 times, huh?
He didn't. No. It took him 3 times. And so anyway, so there was always trouble around us because of Andik. But he was kind of like, everyone was afraid of him, so you were safe, but you weren't safe from other Mafia groups at the same time. So again, we lived in the 2 flats above that, the group that I was with, all my partners. And so one day we were having just a party, a gathering for friends for dinner, and he runs up with a gun, comes right into my room. He knew that I speak Russian and spoke Russian. He's like, Jeremie, watch out, we've got a basically an ambush. And these 2, I looked down and it was like at probably 9:00 at night, a little bit of snow in the air, and these 2 Mercedes pull up and 4 guys get out of each car and they surround our building, and they've all got, various weaponry, right? Uzis to guns and what have you. And they start to basically, they're going to take him out that night. He and his team of about 6-7 guys who lived in that flat. And anyway, he had gotten him out just in time, and he held a lighter out and lit the lighter, and then you saw all these lighters. And this it was going to be a reverse ambush. There was a guy behind the dumpster and a guy behind a building and a guy behind a tree. And I'm like, are you kidding me? Like, I had 10 people in my living room. We're about to have a shootout, in our flat. And I'm like, no, on Deke. Yeah. So anyway, long story short, he leaves, they leave. Nothing happened that night, which was thankful. And then probably about 4 nights later, maybe a week later, he had this his mistress. I thought it was his wife. We found out it was a mistress, and she was probably 50 or so at the time, 55. And she came up, and he had beat her with a baseball bat. And you have a leadership moment. You get this opportunity, and I was 23 at the time. Okay, just to give you context. And so I just had a decision. Do I pull Emma in, or do I keep her out? If I keep her out, she's going to die. And so it was just me, and we had an intern. It was his first day in the country. And so I pulled Emma in, shut the door. We had a steel door, and cleaned her up, and then realized, oh my gosh, I've got a situation here. I've got to get her out, because there's only, you either go up or you go out. There's no other way in the building. And they didn't see footprints in the snow, so they knew that she went up. And so he sent his goons up to check the building, and I played cat and mouse with them for about 2.5 hours, 3 hours. I would move her to one side of our flat. It was a big flat, and they would check the one with lights on, and then they'd leave, and then they'd come back up, and I would have moved her to the other side. They weren't the smartest of guys. And I played cat and mouse with them. And eventually they had to see every single room. Well, I put her in the laundry shower room, and I got undressed down to my boxers and acted like I was taking a shower. And they looked at the whole apartment. And then they said they wanted to see in there, and I could hear it. And I just voraciously attacked them with my words. I'm like, are you kidding me? You want to see if Emma's in my boxers? You think she's here? And I, got them to blush, and then they left, and I dressed Emma up in my best, in my clothes with my baseball cap, and snuck her out at 5 a.m. when they had passed out. And she goes on to live. And then maybe a week later, all of Andik and his guys were gunned down. And that mafia group the Armenians were taken out by the Azerbaijani mafia group. And we had a peaceful, not peaceful takeover, but it was much easier to work with than Andik and his guys. So that's just a starter story to go. That's the kind of stuff that I grew up early on in my career in.
Wow. So when you're dealing with something like that and the fear from that, how does that make it, I don't know if it's easier, or does it make it easier or better whenever you have like the everyday fears that people struggle with? Just being a boss, you have these fears.
Yeah. Well, in that case, it was like adrenaline rush. And, I kind of thought I was James Bond and John Wayne, and we were Americans, and we kind of won the Cold War. That was that era that was in. So I had this almost like above fear. I can't explain it to you. I felt like we won, and I wasn't as afraid. But it was also the right thing to do. And I think that's what I'd say to people who make decisions in work. When the truth is on your side, when it's the right thing to do, you can be more firm. You may not want to have that conversation, but you do. In fact, we have tools that we use to explain this. And one of our tools is called the support challenge matrix. And it's this X and Y axes. And the idea is there's high support and low support, high challenge and low challenge. And the best leaders in the world bring high support and high challenge. So they're always liberating. They are empowering. They're building opportunities. They're fighting for the highest possible good in people. So it's unbelievably high support. I'm for you, but I'm going to push you to be the very best that you can be. And so I almost had this freedom fighter mentality. And that's the type of people that people want to work for, not have to work for. And most people have only experienced people who bring high challenge, but no support. So they've received domination, they've received fear and manipulation. And that's what I experienced in Russia. 70 years of fear and manipulation led to abdication. It didn't lead to opportunity.
Yeah, yeah, and I know that's kind of like I can think back of my worst boss, and that's pretty much it. We had no support. I remember one story where I was, a new manager, and one of my best employees just my boss, my director, did not like him at all, and I have no idea why. To this day, I still don't know why. But he sent us both an email telling us both to come to his office as soon as we could. So we walked to his office. I had no idea. There was no context behind what this was about. We sit down and he looks over and he goes, "So, and I'll just make up a name because I don't want to use a real name." But he
Right.
said, he said, "So Joe, John's going to put you on a performance improvement plan because you haven't been doing a good job." And John tells me that he needs to put you on this performance improvement plan so you make sure it happens. And I look at him like all confused. He's like, "And if John doesn't put you on a performance improvement plan, John will be put on a performance improvement plan." And it's one of those situations where like, oh my gosh, you know, this is one of my best developers, and you're making me put him on a pit for whatever reason. It's
Totally.
ridiculous.
Yeah. And so that, basic levels of, most leaders, most people have experienced the leader who's always fighting for, can we just get on the same page? Can we just make it happen? And so what they don't understand is at best they get compliance, because the more that you push for something, if you haven't established communication and relational trust, basic communication and basic relational trust. Google would talk about psychological safety. We work with Google globally, and that's one of the things that they really focus on. Is a boss should create psychological safety, meaning I want to work with you and I trust you because you seem to be for me. So if that takes place, it's much easier to get alignment. It's much easier to get on the same page and execute and want to do really good work. But when you're forced to, and that's what, again, going back to the Russians in the day, they were forced. So, well, you're not going to get their best. They're going to do just enough to not lose their life. Or in our working world, they're going to do just enough to keep your job. But that doesn't mean
Yeah.
you get the best out of people.
Yeah, absolutely. And what about the opposite of that? Have you have any stories or anything that you can think of where someone was, they didn't challenge enough, and they just kind of,
Oh man,
because we,
all the
we want a
time.
boss that protects you, right? But you don't want to go too far. And I was
That's
thinking about
right.
my kids. Leadership reminds me so much of my kids, and there's been times where I feel like I'm just overprotective, and why am I doing this? I'm never letting the kid get out. So can you give me some stories or some advice about what happens if you're overprotective?
Yeah, absolutely. So if you protect, it's almost like enabling, right?
Hmm.
You're not sharing expectations, so you're bringing so much rah. What it does is it leads to passive aggression. It leads to hinting. So, hey, John, big week next week. Are you ready? Everything good? Yeah, it's going to be a big event. And you're like, yes, I am. I have no idea what you're talking about. But you can feel that they have expectations, but you're always having to guess what it is. So what it does is it almost produces caution, because the leaders probably created a entitlement factory of people who, yeah, we just kind of do what I want, but then our boss kind of gets weird every once in a while, and Dr. Jekyll, Mr. Hyde, and all of a sudden they get passive aggressive or they get angry out of the blue, is because they didn't communicate all along what their expectations were. And if I'm honest, I've spent historically the most time being that type of leader more than the dominator, because I'm a nice guy in general. And so what happens, and also a lot of times, even servant leadership sometimes can feel like protection because you're supposed to be nice,
Hmm.
versus, no, actually, I'm supposed to bring really high support and get you what you need to do the best you can. And then I'm going to hold you accountable to what we've all agreed upon. And I'm going to be like the best coach or the best leader you've ever had before. And people are endeared to that type. Most people they know how to work around the dominators, the people who bring high challenge, no support, but they don't know what to do with the all rah rah and no expectation. It's just really difficult. And so in both cases, they're not really endeared to them. You just kind of like, yeah, take it or leave it. And I have to work for them. I don't want to work for them.
Yeah, I know, like, for me, when I was first a manager, I was probably more on that, rah, rah, don't hold anybody accountable, to anything.
Mm-hmm.
And you're right, communication was probably the biggest thing, because in my mind, I wanted them to be, accountable, but I didn't want anybody to feel bad. I didn't want anybody to get in trouble, you know? And, for me, one of the things that changed that was being able to sit down and actually document our cultural norms and share those. And I call it my IT code. So this is our code. And, I said it once and I thought, okay, well, we're done. And I didn't realize that it was one of those things that I have to do over and over and over again and evaluate those, that code and update it and change it and recommunicate it and make sure that it's like it's instilled in everybody's mind, because just saying it once doesn't mean anything. It's not until you say it and
Mm-hmm.
then you act upon it that matters.
Mm-hmm. No, it's right. And, incentives are so important.
Mm,
And I think a lot of people just don't understand incentives of like real basics. I'm like, people do what the incentives are, like it or
mhm,
not. And it doesn't always mean money. It could be accolades. It could be, freedom. There's all types of incentives that you can give to people, or a chance to do side hustles, work on other things, whatever. But you have to lay out incentives. And so what you just said was so important, that most people don't take the time, and they don't know that they need to do that. But like literally, there needs to be a game plan that people can follow, but it needs to be flexible enough. It can't be rigid, but it needs to be like, hey, this is our code, this is where we're
mhm.
heading, this is what we're doing, and here's why we do it, and here's the incentives that are to it. And most people, they want that, because there's something, they know how to win, they know what winning looks like. And winning doesn't have to be just money. Winning can be in the relationship, or in the team, or in the direction we're heading, or what have you. So, the best leaders do that level of work so that everyone knows what's clearly expected and what direction we're heading. And, they believe that you're fighting for them to get there.
Yeah, yeah, I think that's absolutely right. I think, just by putting that out there, it kind of tells people where your mind is as a leader, and kind of like you said, what your expectations are, and what the fact that you're not just sitting in your office all day doing nothing. You're actually putting things together. You're setting a strategy. You're holding people accountable to this, and it also gives you the opportunity that when you do your one-on-ones or your annual reviews or whatever companies do these days, for us, we do one-on-ones and annual reviews both. It's to make sure that you have that talking point to say, oh, you didn't do this. Remember, in our code, we said that we always choose people over process. And, here's an example where you didn't. How can we fix this in the future? And you can use those to hold people accountable, because you've clearly communicated this is your expectations.
Absolutely. Yeah. And we use, so I like to use metaphor, and I like to
Mhm.
make things really simple. And at Giant, in my business company that I started, we basically have about 65 tools. And my business partner and I, Steve Cochran, we came up with these tools because we realized that most adults are cynical know-it-alls, and they don't read anymore. And so they have their own attention issues themselves, right? So we created all of these tools, but we put it into the metaphor of the Sherpa on Mount Everest. And we figured out that really is the best example of a leader. It wasn't a climber on Mount Everest, as most people always talk about. It's the Sherpa. And the Sherpa, for those who don't know, Sherpa are a native to that region, the Himalayas, and they were born at 14,000 feet. So they have a genetic predisposition to the altitude. Their brain can handle it, their lungs can handle it. Whereas lowlanders, we'd die in 30 minutes if we were put on the mountain.
Yeah.
And so the Sherpa, though, what they do is they go, they're the most healthy people on the mountain. They go up ahead of everyone else, make sure the ropes are secure, make sure the ladders are set. So they do the support first. Then they get everyone ready, and they're like, all right, let's go. We're going to get you to the next level. And they've learned how to motivate people based on people's wiring and personality. They know that some people need stiff challenge, and other people need a pat on the back, and other people just need to know how to do certain things. And so they read their climbers really well. Each Sherpa is given about 5 climbers or so to get up the mountain. And then they move in between them to see how they're doing, always focused on what's undermining, what do they need to work on, how do they get to the next level. And I'm like, that's an example of a Sherpa. And the last thing that you want on Mount Everest is you don't want to work with an asthmatic Sherpa, right? You don't want anyone on the mountain who's having a hard time breathing. And that's the problem, is because most leaders haven't thought that way. They've just kind of expected, well, employees just need to do their thing. Like, well, actually, it's your responsibility and their responsibility, but you have to help them get to the next level. But you never carry anyone up the mountain, and they have to climb. And it's this fine balance, this calibration of support and challenge.
Yeah. So how much of this should fall on the leader themselves, kind of growing, or fall on the company to say, hey, look, we need to empower our leaders. We need to teach our leaders leadership. Because I know, I think back when I first became a manager, I didn't have any leadership training the first year I was there. And then our company started rolling it out slowly. And that leadership training was really, kind of a joke. It was more like, here's how you should fill out a performance appraisal, and I mean, they had stories from some of our executives, and they were all kind of pretty poor, honestly. And then when I hear something like this, I'm like, yes, this is it. How do we, who's responsible for teaching this?
Yeah. All right. So let's talk about the philosophy of that. So if you're listening and you're leading people, is it your responsibility or is it the employee's responsibility? So another metaphor I like to use is, think of a gardener in a greenhouse. Okay. Culture. So if you lead 5 people, okay, you have 5 to 7 team members, and you're the team leader, then that's a greenhouse. Culture is a greenhouse, and inside a company you might have several greenhouses, small greenhouses, right? And so the leader is like the gardener, and the employee is like a plant. So I asked the first question is, whose responsibility is it for the plant to grow in a greenhouse? Like, well, the plant wants to grow. It's naturally designed to grow. It wants to grow. But as a gardener, you could affect its growth. You could put it in the corner in a dark area that gets no sunlight. You could not give it access to water. You could, maybe there's mites, or there's bad soil or whatever. So the responsibility is both. Philosophically, the leader is responsible to position the plants to give it the best chance to grow. If you have good plants, the plant will naturally grow. So there's certain plants, by the way, that, and some of you that are on here, you're cacti, you're the cactus, and you don't need much water, and you know who you are. Just kind of like, hey, leave me alone, put me on the ledge, I'm good. But most plants, most people, it's positioning. And a toxic culture with a really bad gardener basically kills the plants. And then that leader, gripes to the other gardeners, the other leaders, man, you can't find good plants these days, can you? Can you believe I got this one online, Indeed, and they shipped me another plant. You just can't find good plants. I'm like, well, is it the plant, or is it you, or is it the culture that you place them in? And so the idea is, if you're a Sherpa or if you're a good gardener, you're giving them the chance, you're giving them the opportunity to grow. You're giving them the best chance to grow. Then it's up to the plant. And if they can't continue to grow, even though you've given it sunlight and good soil and good water, then you need a new plant. But most people have just not thought about it that way, and they've not positioned their people and put them in the right spot.
Yeah, I really like that metaphor. And it reminds me back when I first, when I was first leading a team and I was really struggling, I got a mentor for the first time. And I remember I had 2 people on my team quit on the same day for different reasons. It's like different times, they both just quit. And I called him up and I was like, yeah, I'm having a bad day. I had, 2 people quit. And he's like, why do you think they quit? I said, well, Charlotte pays better. We were just south of Charlotte at the time. And I was like, yeah, and turnover is really high for developers right now. So he's like, yeah, I don't think that's it. and it really took him telling me that, hey, like what you're saying, it's the gardener's fault sometimes. It's not the plant.
Yeah.
Yeah. Sometimes you're not giving them enough water, or you're doing something that you need to look inward for a little bit and figure this out. And that's kind of what started my whole journey on trying to figure out this whole leadership enigma.
Totally. Because people want to work. Most people, let's just say the majority of people want to do good work. A lot of them have just been jaded from past leaders. So they come in jaded or cynical. So it takes them a while to really see someone that's worth following. But if they're working for a leader, I'm going to be here. I would rather work with someone who makes me better. I don't want to have to work with someone who I have to complain about to my family at night at the dinner table. So the idea is like, look, to be the best leader gives the best opportunity for the employees to be the best employees. So it is a process. We do in my business. We basically got to a point where we were trying to figure out how to scale this because I had years before I had owned John Maxwell's assets, and I had these conferences called the Catalyst Conference and LeaderCast and all of these big brands that I used to run, and I created LeaderCast as an example. And the problem is that it was espousing all this stuff in books or stages. And people were like, yeah, this is good, but how? How do you actually do it? So I sold all of that. I moved to London and I started practicing. No, I want to figure out how to scale leader development inside organizations. And I want to do it. And I want to figure out how to eliminate high cost. I want to make it super simple. So we kind of started watching the best of 21st century learning and started understanding the visual nature that's needed. And we came up with these tools that you don't have to read 65 books. You can learn 65 tools, and they interact with one another, and they're visual because our world is visual. And you can write them on a cocktail napkin, and you can teach them to someone. And when you teach them to someone, especially at home, then you'll learn them at work, and you'll start. When you teach, you learn. Mm-hmm. And so we created imprintable, memorable visuals that create common language. And then the common language starts to work together. And then everyone knows the common language. And then you use it like mirrors. Now, leader development is like a mirror. I'm not judging you. I'm not subjectively telling you you're horrible. I'm showing you a mirror, telling you where I've had broccoli in my teeth, and then asking, where's the broccoli in your teeth? And then all of a sudden, this thing called self-awareness starts to happen. So it started to work so dramatically that over the last couple of years, we hit another ceiling because we had to scale. We had to figure out how are we going to scale our workers. So we decided to openly certify. So we went to a SaaS model. We became a technology business. We became a SaaS business, basically. And we just said, let's lower the price so low that it's like Netflix for professionals. It's not that low, but it's between $199 a month and $250 a month, which is nothing in the business world. And it's scaling like crazy right now. But it's all this like social science we've been trying to figure out. We've been trying to figure out, how do you get a leader to want to be someone worth following? How do you get them to actually do the work? How do you build up consultants to help around the world? And then the last little piece that we're figuring out is actually we now have a person called a catalyst inside a company, and we certify them. It's more than train the trainer. They kind of create the system internally, and they start becoming this Sherpa and this guide or this internal champion inside a business, and it's really working. So it's been fun to kind of use this the issues of why leader development historically doesn't work, because most of it doesn't work. It's kind of like you shared that story about people kind of talking about their forms or whatever.
Yeah.
So
most leadership development that I've seen is more like just so the company can check a checkbox and say we've done it.
Yes.
And let's move on. But I agree with you. I think definitely it takes someone that wants to learn, and how do you get those employees to do that? How do you get them to realize that they want to be a leader that's followed, and show them the benefits of it, that they're not here just for a paycheck, but you're here to do something bigger.
And the way that the secret that we figured out on that is get them to take it home and do it at home, and then they'll see it for themselves. And so we have people like on a weekly basis, I get an email of like, hey, I got to tell you, my son's talking to me again. Or I'm connecting to my wife like I never have before, or I'm, what have you at home. And then they go, and then my team is getting, because they could try it out on a daily basis that way.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's the part. It's like it's getting people to understand their wiring and personality with their emotional intelligence and their skills, and putting that all together. And we call it the core. It's like you actually start expanding your core. It's like you, John, you were talking about you using this podcast to learn, and the growth that the podcast has brought to you, because it enabled you to try things on with your team, and then you see it works, and then you're held accountable because you talk about it. Well, it's the same thing. It's like when people start trying things and like that works. Oh my gosh. We have a tool that gets rid of gossip. It works. We have a tool on how to develop people, a whole system on how to develop people. It works. You just follow it. We have a tool on personality that doesn't label people and scales like crazy, called the 5 voices. It works. So when people see things that work, then they want more of it. And so that's the fun part.
Yeah, absolutely. And going back to some of these tools and the ways that work, and you talked about how you can bring it home with you. I found that there's such a correlation between leading at home and leading at work. I mean, it seems like a no-brainer now that I look back on it, but at the time, when I first had kids and was trying to figure out parenting and figuring out how to lead a family, and not realizing that that was the exact same thing that I should be doing at work too. And some of these tools, actually, most of these things will follow both scenarios. When you want to lead a good family, you want to grow your kids, you want to nurture them and do what's best for them, and teach them discipline and accountability and leadership themselves. That's the same stuff you should be doing at work to your people that report to you.
We made all our tools fit an educated 13-year-old, because we realized that that's the only way you can get things to scale. Because like Harvard is awesome, it's great, it's really interesting, but it doesn't scale. It just is a cul-de-sac learning. Enneagram, DISC, Myers-Briggs, it doesn't scale because no one knows what a ENTJ is, or a 7 with a wing 8, or it's hard to explain. So we had to make it simple enough, and that was the secret to get to 95% of your employee base, where most leader development only stays at the top 15%. And then it creates resentment on everyone else because they weren't at the retreat with all of these long words that I don't know what they mean, but you're using them over me and on me.
Yeah, exactly. No, I think that's a great approach, and I couldn't agree with you more. And I found like I remember I was taking a parenting class, and they were teaching like little tools and techniques and things. And one of the things was, what's your plan for? And like if your kids, didn't do something, and instead of going to them and saying, "Hey, you didn't make your bed, you didn't clean your room, you didn't do this or that," just say, "Hey, what's your plan for getting your room clean?" And let them realize that you recognize the room isn't clean, but you're giving them the opportunity to fix it, and they can communicate that. So I decided one day I was going to take that to work and just see how what's your plan for worked at work, And I had someone that didn't turn in their reports on time. So instead of going and saying, "Hey, your reports are late again," blah blah blah, lecturing them or something like that, send them a quick little message. "Hey, what's your plan for getting the reports done this week?" "Oh, sorry, I realized I didn't get it. I'll get that taken care." And they got it. And after that, it was just a much easier conversation. It wasn't me, disciplining them. It was just letting them be aware that this isn't here, and I know that you have a plan for it. So what is that? And showing them
I,
encouragement.
I love that, John. That's so smart. I've never heard that. It's really good. We have a phrase that we use. It's calling people up, not out, which
Mhm.
is what you just did. So calling kids not out, but calling them up, calling your employees up, not out. So it's like, hey, John, and this is what I'm seeing. I really feel like you've got the opportunity here, but I need you to step into it. But what you just said is a really practical idea on how to do that. I really like that.
Yeah, and full disclosure, I got that from a positive parenting. We were doing a small group at church was doing a parenting class, and that's where it came from. I was like, I'm gonna try that at work, and
Yeah,
it seemed to work great.
smart. But that's all it is. Leadership it's a mindset, and it's a lifestyle. So it's a mindset first that leads to a lifestyle. So my mindset is I want to liberate. I want to be someone that people want to follow, not have to follow. So therefore, I've got to learn how to bring support and challenge consistently. I've got to do that with my kids, with my spouse, with my business partners, with my team, whoever, even in the community. So, but once you do that long enough, then it becomes a lifestyle, and then you become consistent. And that's when, if you're a consistent liberator, you're like the Sherpa. Everyone wants to be on your team because they know wherever you go, you're consistent and you help people get to the next level. And most people are so insecure, they're for themselves. But if you actually take it in as a lifestyle, your reputation goes up, work becomes more fun, you have more impact. And when you have impact, I mean, it brings life to you. So it's a skill though you have to learn, and you have to learn it by getting over your cynicism. And what I did at Giant was just create the tools so people can use it. So we have it from the 100X to the 5 gears, which is sign language we teach around emotional intelligence, to the 5 voices, which is the best personality system that scales. All of those are designed to help people learn these life hacks. And so anyway.
No, yeah, I definitely think consistency is extraordinarily important. And that's one of the things we're working on with our kids right now is discipline and consistency, and building those habits of discipline throughout your day and throughout your work, your life. And that carries through at work too. When I can look at my employees and build habits of consistency. We started that probably 5 years ago now. We started doing daily stand-ups with our help desk team, and which is kind of a unusual thing. Usually the help desk team, they're just answering tickets and solving problems that way. They don't do daily stand-ups the way like a development team or an engineering team might do. We started implementing that with the help desk team to allow for better communication, better understanding, plus holding each other accountable. Because if you see, like, if one person in the group is saying that I'm still working on the same problem 2 or 3 days in a row, then the other people should jump in and help them. And it holds them accountable to asking for help and being there for one another and volunteering help. And we've seen, just a significant increase in customer service, close ticket time, and just improvement of support just by, implementing that daily routine and that habit of having a stand-up.
Totally. No, absolutely. That's good.
Yeah. So I like to hear more about your tools. How can people find out more about some of these tools and learn more about the things that you and Giant are working on, today?
Yes. Yeah. So there's a couple of ways. If you like this and you go, hey, I'd love to know more and see them, you can go to giant.tv/JK. So that's giant.tv/JK. Jeremie Kubicek doesn't stand for just kidding. And then, but if you're, we also have, we certify people to use this as a system inside the organization. And we made one really for you and your link. It's just giantcoach.com/geek leader. So if you go to giantcoach.com/geek leader, it'll give you resources. You can take the free assessment. You can learn about certification, and you can kind of see what our world is.
Awesome. And I want to link that up in the show notes at geekleader.com so people can go to it through there. And man, Jeremy, it's been a great conversation. I really appreciate having you on, and thanks for all you're doing. Thanks for your books. Thanks for the videos that you put out there. It means a lot.
Absolutely. John, wish you the well. Everyone listening, hope you guys wish you well in your journey, and keep being consistent.
If you enjoyed that episode, please leave a rating and review in Apple Podcasts. I'd greatly appreciate that. And also, don't forget to check out merch. We have some t-shirts that I've designed that are on at geekleader.com. You can click on the merchandise section there and check that out. And also, don't forget about the books from our guests. So if you like this guest and other guests that have written books, please go ahead and check that out at geekleader.com. I would greatly appreciate it, and I'm sure they would too.